everyone. Good morning. I greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Today is the fourth Sunday of Lent. Now, we're past the midpoint of our Lenten journey as we walk with our Lord toward Jerusalem and the events of Holy Week. In fact, we are just 2 weeks away from Palm Sunday and 3 weeks away from Easter. This is a high and holy time for those who believe, and today we're going to look at a couple of people who were very close to Jesus in the last days of our earthly ministry. I really recommend that you listen to the words of the choir anthem when we get there. They are going to be singing something that will be important to the sermon later. But let's begin with our call to worship, led by Lynne Johnston.
Good morning. God calls us away from the tumult of the world, that we may focus our thoughts on things that are lasting. In God's presence, we see our lives more clearly. The broken pieces are put back together. God calls us out of loneliness into a life of community. Worshiping together, caring about one another, we find out what it means to be truly human. But God will send us back into the world's confusion and busyness, its brokenness and isolation. We will go with serenity and joy, strengthened to be God's servants and bearers of peace. Let us join together in singing the hymn of approach, number 230. And now for our moment of ministry and mission. Folks have announcements this morning. Thank you.
Hi, I want to remind you that we've got a great treat in store today. We're having a small brunch after church in the fellowship hall. We'll be having a fruit salad and a croissant, not too much, tide you over. And then the greatest treat of all is that we're having the Redbird duo singing a lot of traditional and songs that we've heard over the years and some of their original music. So please come.
Today is the last day for the OGHM, whatever, that little envelope that's in your thing. Anyway, this is the last day. Just a little teeny bit will help. Any amount is great, and we appreciate that.
Yard sale on Saturday, indoor yard sale. Bring your stuff Friday afternoon. And if you can help during the day with the sale, I'd appreciate it. Or cleanup, that's the hardest job. Thank you.
Hi. So looking forward to Maundy Thursday, just coming up 2.5 weeks. We're planning to have our, I guess, traditional soup and bread supper before, followed by the service. It's been a few years since we did it, so I have to try to remember the routine. But one starter is to get some people who can make some soup and bring it in, or bread also, but soup. So I've got a sign-up sheet. I'll have it out in the main hall, so if you can volunteer to provide something, and if you know what you're bringing, put it down so we can get some variety. So if we can get some volunteers from that, we'll go from there. Thank you.
ML and I celebrated our 51st anniversary, or 56th, depending on how you count, yesterday.
I think that that's everyone. Anybody else? Oh, got one more over here.
I just wanted to give an update on Marge Pendleton. She certainly had a lot she's been going through for the last 6 months. But on top of that, she has also just now gotten shingles, so keep her in your prayers.
Very good. I think that that's all of our business this morning. So let's turn back to worship with our prayer of invocation, which you'll find in your bulletin. Let's read together. O God, you are the giver of wonderful things. You gave us life. You have filled our lives with family and friends. You lavish us with your grace. You have given us this day to add to the many we have shared. And you have given us Jesus. Help us grow in our understanding and appreciation of just how much you love us, and open our hearts that our worship might be an act of praise and thanksgiving for all you have done for us. We ask this in the name of the one who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Hello.
So good morning, Sierra and Josie and Kai and Amelia and Sawyer. Today we're going to think of words to describe God's love. So I'm going to give you a hint, and then I want you to generate one or two, and Sawyer's going to write them down, and we'll put them all together at the end. So first of all, I want you to think of someone who protects us. Can you come up with a word? Somebody who protects us. Amelia? Your parents, yep. And Sawyer's writing that down in case I forget. Anybody else you can think of that protects us out in the world? Amelia? God, yeah. Well, These are words to describe God's love. So that's one more. Come on, come on. Who protects us? That might wear a uniform. That might, Kai? Friends. Good. Okay, now here's something easy. Can you think of soft things to lie down on? Wow. A bed. Anything else? Amelia? Pillows. Okay. How about safe places? Okay. Home. What else is safe? Police, keep us safe. Yeah, we'll put that down. Okay, what are things that give us comfort? Well, a bed. What else? Being state champion. Kai is state champion in his weight class in wrestling. Okay, what about people who hurt others? Can you think of any of those? Robbers, yep. How about bullies? Okay, and last of all, places where people live. Well, at home, yeah. Anything else? In a neighborhood. Okay. Now, one more. What? On a houseboat. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be kind of like Mad Libs, but serious, I think. We're going to put the words you came up with and you generated and come up with our own version of Psalm 23, which begins, "The Lord is my shepherd." So David, king from the Bible, wrote a lot of Psalms, and he used ideas from his daily life, which is what I wanted you to come up with, to describe God and the feelings of love and protection he felt in God. Because David was a shepherd, he knew all about how a shepherd takes care of the sheep and protects them from harm. So one way David pictured God was like a shepherd. So now what we have is, "The Lord is my friend and policeman. I have everything I need. God lets me lie down in pillows and a bed. Though I walk through," did we do scary places? I forgot scary. "Though I walk through scary places, I will not be afraid, for you are with me. Your bed and your state champion comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the sight of bullies and robbers. My cup overflows. I know that your goodness and love will be with me all my life, and your houseboat and neighborhood and home will be my home as long as I live." So isn't it interesting that even with the different ideas we came up with, the meaning of Psalm 23 is still basically the same? God loves us. God cares for us. We are not alone. So let's remember that, either Psalm 23 or this version. Let us pray. Thank you, God, for loving me. Thank you for your protection. Help us remember we are not alone. Thank you, God, for loving everybody. Amen.
I want to invite everyone to open up the hymn book to number 184. And the congregation is invited to sing verses 4 and 5. So please follow along.
Said Jesus to Mary, now what will you do with your ointment so rich and so rare?
She said, I'll wipe it away with my hair.
Tomorrow, oh Mary, I'll think of the poor. This ointment, it could have been sold. And think of the blankets and think of the bread you could buy with the silver and gold, he said. You could buy with the silver and gold.
Tomorrow, I'll think of the poor. Tomorrow, she said, not today. For dearer than all of the poor in the world is my love who is going away, she said. My love who is going away. She said, Jesus to Mary, your love is so deep. Today you must do as you will. Tomorrow you say I am going away, but my body I leave with you still, he said. My body I leave with you still. The poor of the world are my body, he said. To the end of the world they shall be. The bread and the blankets shall give to the poor, and the dough you have given to me, he said. The dough you have given to me. My body will hang on the cross of the world. Tomorrow, he said, and today. And Martha and Mary will find me again, and wash all my sorrow away, he said. And wash all my sorrow away.
Well, I said we'd be looking at a couple of Jesus followers today. The central characters in our scripture lesson are Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' disciples, one of the 12 who had followed Jesus from Galilee and who had heard all of his preaching, and had heard it and maybe didn't understand it. The other character is Mary. Jesus often stayed in Bethany with a family which included Martha, Lazarus, and Mary. The scripture passage just before this story is the telling of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Lynn, you got a scripture lesson?
The reading is from John 12, verses 1 through 8. Mary anoints Jesus. 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." So ends the reading.
Thank you again to the choir for singing Said Judas to Mary by Sidney Carter. Sidney Bertram Carter, who died in March 2004, was an English poet, songwriter, and folk musician born in Camden Town, London. He's best known for the song Lord of the Dance, set to the tune of the American Shakers song Simple Gifts. He studied at Balliol College, Oxford, graduating in history in 1936. A committed pacifist, Carter joined the Friends Ambulance Unit on the outbreak of World War II and served in Egypt, Palestine, and Greece. When asked about Lord of the Dance, Carter once said, "I see Christ as the incarnation of the piper who is calling us. He dances that shape and pattern which is at the heart of our reality. By Christ, I mean not only Jesus. In other times and places, other planets, there may be other lords of the dance. But Jesus is the one I know of first and best. I sing of the dancing pattern in the life and words of Jesus." When I was in high school, I had the privilege of hearing Sidney Carter in person. I loved Lord of the Dance, but I was particularly struck by another one of his songs, Said Judas to Mary. It told the story which we've heard in our lectionary reading today. It forced me to ask a question about how to balance faith and mission. Said Judas to Mary, "Now what will you do with your ointment so rich and so rare? I'll pour it all over the feet of the Christ, and I'll wipe it away with my hair," she said. Oh, Mary, oh, think of the poor. This ointment, it could have been sold. And think of the blankets, and think of the bread you could buy with the silver and gold. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. The question is still before us. How do we balance our life of contemplation and worship with our call to mission? How do we balance in-reach with outreach? For some, it seems that the church is always involved in mission projects, always raising money or being asked for money to send out to those who are in need. Think of our yard sale coming next Saturday, which in part will benefit a family of Ukrainians here in our community. Think about all of the different offerings we've taken to help the folks who are involved in that war in Ukraine. For other people, it seems that we don't do enough, that the church spends only a small fraction of the total budget on missions and social concerns. There's some folk who would like us to do more study, others who would wish for more action. How do we find a balance, and how do we prioritize not only our life as a church, but our personal life and discretionary time and income as well? The season of Lent is a most appropriate time for us to ask ourselves some of these questions. Traditionally, Lent has been about giving. giving something up, giving to others, giving gifts of our time. In our denomination, it's become the special season for One Great Hour of Sharing, our international mission offering. In the last year, through your gifts to One Great Hour of Sharing, the United Church of Christ was present with our neighbors in tangible ways, standing in solidarity and mutuality to respond to ongoing and emerging needs and to work for the benefit of all. Working collaboratively with conferences, local, national, and global partners, we helped to provide clean water, food, education, healthcare, resettlement for refugees and displaced persons, emergency relief, and disaster preparedness and response. Wildfires, earthquakes, hurricanes, and flooding have ravaged communities in the United States and worldwide, leaving families and communities in desperate need of assistance. Some of these disasters have occurred in our country, others to friends and neighbors in countries thousands of miles away across the globe. Strengthened by the power of God's Spirit and your collective generosity, the United Church of Christ continues to work with partners to care for others and not give up, as together we build a just world for all. Over the years, I've had the privilege of seeing OGHS funds in use, building medical clinics in Honduras, rehabbing a children's hospital in Budapest, Hungary, teaching women new skills so that they could support their families in Turkey, bringing emergency medicine and supplies to Central America after Hurricane Mitch and to the area around New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. Our One Great Hour of Sharing offering is a powerful act of mission. But let's take a look back at the lesson, at the story itself. This is one of the rare stories which is told not only by John, whose telling we have before us today, but also by Matthew and Mark. Now, Matthew, Luke, and John often tell the same stories. They're called the synoptic or parallel gospels. But John tells more mystical stories of Jesus' life and death, stories from John's own memories, but written much later when he was an old man. When the gospel stories line up in this way with John, telling the same story as the synoptics, we have a clear window back to an event of great importance. Judas and Mary were not alone with Jesus at this time. They were gathered at the home of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. Jesus had recently raised Lazarus from a premature death. Martha, as always, was serving them. Now, these were Jesus' closest friends outside of the disciples. They were like family to him, and he stayed with them when he was in the area around Jerusalem. In her devotion to Jesus, maybe out of thankfulness for the resurrection or restoration of her brother's life, Mary takes a costly ointment or perfume and anoints Jesus' feet, wiping his feet with her hair. This is an act not only of generosity, but an act of humility. It's an act of adoration, of recognition of Jesus and of worship. Well, Judas doesn't like it. The Gospel of John paints Judas as a thief, wanting the money for himself, but using the poor as an excuse for Mary giving the ointment to him to convert to cash. The stories in Matthew and Mark are not as harsh and emphasize Judas' true care for the poor and desire for the money to provide food and blankets. They argue. In both tellings, it's Jesus who ends the debate. He sets the incident in the context of what is about to happen to him. This may be the last time that they are gathered together. Jesus is about to go to Jerusalem, He commends Mary's action as a preparation for his burial. But he does not say that it's not good to minister to the poor. In John's gospel, Jesus says, "You always have the poor with you." The Gospel of Mark recalls Jesus saying a bit more, "For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish, but you will not always have me." So what wisdom does this story have for us today? It seems to strike a balance, calling us to find time when we can focus on Jesus' presence, time for worship and study, time to be like Mary. And then it reminds us that the poor are always with us and commends the doing of kindness. Taken in the whole gospel message, blended with Jesus' teachings on those who are in need, we hear Jesus' wisdom in the song of Sidney Carter. "Tomorrow you say, I am going away, but my body I leave with you still. The poor of the world are my body," he said. "To the end of the world they shall be. The bread and the blankets you give to the poor, you will know you have given to me," he said. We find Jesus' presence as we minister to those in need. Our missions offerings are both a way to pour costly ointment on Christ's body presence with us, and in the same action, to do kindness to those who are with us still, the poor of the world. While the disciples had the human body of Jesus with them, we have been left with those whom Jesus loved. In these remaining days of Lent, may we find balance and grace in time alone with Christ in prayer and meditation, and in time of action and mission, serving Christ alive in the poor of the world. Amen. Our next hymn is "In the Cross of Christ I Glory," number 185. This is our time for sharing joys and concerns. We have some things that are all already listed in the bulletin this morning, but what other joys and concerns do we have? We already had one voice. Was it for Marge Pendleton? Okay, we'll put down Marge. That was shingles. All right. Let's see, what else do we have? From Eric? Oh, no, going back that way.
I have two prayer requests for in-laws of mine. My sister-in-law and her husband moved here from Florida quite recently. They're in their late 80s, and they both tested positive for COVID
Ooh,
almost
okay.
as soon as they got here.
Oh,
And
boy.
he is not in good health and is really struggling with COVID. And the other prayer is for another sister-in-law's husband who had emergency surgery yesterday. I've not heard any more than that.
What are the first names of the two with COVID?
Barbara and Chuck are the two with COVID, and George is the one who had emergency surgery.
Okay. And that last one with the emergency surgery, his name was? George. Okay. I was still writing down Chuck. Surgery. I know. I think I have to get back into that. I once did know how to shorthand. Other joys and concerns. Eric.
So I have a joy to share. Sawyer in the Bonnie Eagle Jazz Band actually had a successful trip up to Hamden Academy yesterday, where for only the second time in the history of Bonnie Eagle Jazz Band, they made it to the state competition. And we were lucky enough we didn't take the trip with them up to Hampton, but we did see it live streamed, and they did really great, and it was such a joy to see them play some great jazz music and have a good time doing it. So
that's great. Good stuff.
I think it's wonderful to have Jim back in church with us today.
Yes.
I didn't notice him when I come around the corner, but I looked over and there he was sitting there. So great to have you back with us, Jim.
Absolutely.
Birthday wishes to Phil Lesh, who turned 83 on March 15th. Phil Lesh is the bass guitarist for the Grateful Dead. One of the legendary rock bands and one of the probably best bass players to have existed.
Just who are all of our March birthdays? Do we have March birthdays in the house? Anybody else? I've got 1, 2. Oh, Mel. Okay. Y'all got it. Okay. Well, we'll just put March birthdays in general down. How's that? All right. Anyone else? Okay.
I have a colleague I used to work with in Millinocket when I started my teaching career, and we had kids at the same age. She has a son who's my son's age, who is 43, who moved away to Texas. A couple weeks ago, he was in a motorcycle accident, and as a result, he had to have his leg amputated. And I read on the GoFundMe page yesterday that he's unemployed, he has no insurance, and so this is going to be devastating in so many ways. His name is Ryan Hartung.
With all of these things in our hearts and minds, let's turn toward God in prayer. Let's pray. Gracious God, God of all nations and peoples, God of all faiths and races, great God and gentle God, we thank you for calling us into your church and for all of your promises. We thank you for the gift of Jesus Christ and for the example he is to us. We come now longing to know the touch of your Spirit, that we may be encouraged to be about in the world as your ambassadors and peacemakers, trusting in all that you have said and eager to share your message of hope with those around us. We know that there are many who need to feel your presence and courage today. Especially, we would pray for those listed in our bulletin who need to know the touch of your hand. We think of all those who are suffering from chronic illnesses or the hidden illnesses of anxiety, depression, or addiction. We think of Marge Pendleton, who's dealing now with shingles on top of the other concerns. We think of Barbara and Chuck as they deal with COVID, and we think of all those who still are dealing with COVID, both here locally and across the country and around the world. We think of George, who's had surgery, help him to make a good recovery. And we think of Ryan, who's dealing with the after effects of the motorcycle accident. Loving God, we've known joys this week. We think of Sawyer and the jazz band in the state competition. We think of how nice it is to have Jim back in church with us. And we think of all of the birthdays, both of those we know here in church and those we might know in the community or in our families. We give thanks, infinite God, for the ministry of One Great Hour of Sharing and those who administer the funds that we bring even now, that they might serve those in critical need. Make us mindful of those near at hand who are homeless or hungry. Send us to those who despair and those who feel alone and abandoned. Give us courage in the face of our world's conflicts and challenges, from domestic abuse and chemical dependency to nuclear threats and the continuing conflict in Ukraine. Watch over those in the service wherever they may be stationed today. Lord, in the season of Lent, when we focus on the needs of the world, help us to not forget those we know intimately well, our family and friends. Give us time to reflect on our relationship with you, time to be at peace, and to count our blessings. All these things we would ask in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord and Savior. Amen. Freely you have received, freely give. Our deacons will wait upon us for our offerings, our tithes, and our One Great Hour of Sharing gifts. We offer these gifts in the spirit of gratitude and with an open heart. These offerings are one way of showing our commitment to care for those who are in need, neighbors near and far, whom we are unlikely to meet. Let us not grow weary in giving our gifts to others. Bless them just as you have us, with an extra measure of your grace. In Christ's name, amen. And our hymn is Break Not the Circle, number 367. May the strength of God pilot us. May the power of God preserve us. May the wisdom of God instruct us. May the hand of God protect us. May Christ be with us this day and forevermore. Amen.